Alrighty, guys, this is Module 37, Intro to Intelligence. Okay, so what is intelligence? Really, depending on the culture, there's different meanings. But our definition of intelligence is the ability to learn from experience, solve problems, and use knowledge to adapt to new situations. So Spearman, this guy Charles Spearman, he believed that we have a general intelligence, or G factor, and that this general intelligence underlies all of our mental abilities and is therefore measured by every task on an intelligence test. In simpler terms, he says that if you do well, let's say in mathematical reasoning, if we have G, or general intelligence, we should do relatively well also on other factors of intelligence, like linguistic ability, like spatial reasoning, like problem solving, so on and so forth. And he found evidence of G by using this statistical procedure called factor analysis, where basically he looked at clusters of related items and how related they were. So, for example, he found in his research that when people took IQ tests, their subscores were strongly positively correlated. If you had high scores in math, you had high scores in English. If you had low scores in math, you typically have low scores in English. It's very rare for a person to have completely distinct scores, even if they're different subskills. Now, he did say that sometimes we do have S, which are special abilities, but it just means like maybe you're profoundly good at math, doesn't mean you're poor at English, though. You still would score relatively high in comparison to someone else. Now, there are critics that say that we have many types of intelligence, that, this G factor is too broad and not everybody experiences this. Like they say, there are people who are amazing in music but horrible at math. So, we can't just have one general intelligence. But we're going to talk more about what the research says in a moment. Okay, so there are a couple of different theories of multiple intelligences. First, there was Gardner. Howard Gardner said that we have 8 relatively independent intelligences. He's even considered adding a ninth. And these multiple intelligences, he claims, that are distinct are visual spatial, linguistic, kinesthetic, naturalistic, musical, logical, interpersonal, and interpersonal. And if you look at this image on the left, you can see kind of more detailed explanations of what each of these types of intelligences are. So he said that basically all of us have various of all of these, but in different kind of packages. So, for myself, I have high interpersonal intelligence and intrapersonal. I have lots of linguistic intelligence and musical, and maybe I suffer more in my visual spatial or logical. One piece of evidence for Gardner's multiple intelligences theory is the fact that there are people who have what we call Savant Syndrome. If you've ever heard of a savant, these are people who have pretty much very limited mental abilities, but will have a very amazing skill in one thing. So, for example, there's this guy, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'll show you guys a video later, but he has a very low IQ score. I want to say like a 50, like it's pretty low. Yet he has this amazing visual, spatial, and kind of kinesthetic and artistic ability, where he can basically look at anything and create a sculpture to great detail of that item, especially horses. So this does kind of provide evidence of maybe multiple intelligences, because they don't have that G. They're not having that relationship with all of their other intelligence factors. With savants, about 4/5 are male, and almost all of them are on the autism spectrum. There are people who have acquired savant syndrome, and those people often don't have autism. Often what has happened with them is that they've suffered some kind of brain damage and then acquire some new ability. And then we have Sternberg. And Sternberg also said that we have multiple intelligences, but he said we don't have 8. That's too many. He said that we only have 3. That we have analytical, and analytical intelligence is kind of also like academic intelligence. So it measures our success in academic settings. This is like when we think of an IQ test, this is what typically analytical intelligence, according to Sternberg, measures. Creative intelligence is another category he said we have, which is the ability to adapt to new situations and generate novel ideas. And then practical intelligence, which is the intelligence for everyday tasks that may be poorly defined and may have multiple solutions. Now, an issue with multiple intelligence theories is that again and again and again, research has demonstrated that there is most likely a G factor, because consistently, like in Gardner's test, for example, people that score high in linguistic tend to score high in logical. There's a correlation, which suggests that there's probably some underlying factor that allows us to be successful in all of those things. You can kind of think about it like with athletic ability, okay? If you are, a really good football player, for example, you probably have, a lot of strength, good hand-eye coordination, speed, so on and so forth, that could make you successful in other sports as well. So there's like that underlying ability. Another critique of kind of intelligence tests in general is that intelligence alone does not make one successful. In fact, there are other tests that are better predictors of how successful one would be than IQ tests. So success really is kind of your intelligence plus your grit. How hard are you willing to work? And we'll talk more about this later. But a lot of people think, geniuses are often the experts. But in fact, geniuses are often not experts, because to be an expert in something, you have to basically dedicate 10 years of your life to that. And geniuses get bored very easily and don't stick to it. So they don't have as much grit sometimes. And then lastly, we have emotional intelligence. So some psychologists propose that we have this intelligence called social intelligence. And one critical part of social intelligence is emotional intelligence. Our definition of emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive, understand, manage, and use emotions. And I've kind of broken down what these all mean more here. So, like, perceiving emotions is your ability to recognize them in other people, in their faces, music, stories. Understanding emotions, so being able to predict an emotion, how they may change. Managing emotions, so knowing how to express them and how to manage others, and then using emotions to facilitate adaptive or creative thinking. Now, emotionally intelligent people tend to be more successful in their relationships than people who score low on emotional intelligence. They do well in careers and parenting situations. So there is some validity to it, some predictive validity. And I'm going to have you test yourself, and that's it. See ya. Bye.